All right, Sports Talker Nation, welcome back to another MLB season and team preview. Today we're going to discuss my beloved Philadelphia Phillies, so you should probably settle in. I'm going to have quite a bit to say. As always, this is your host, the G-Man. As you know at this point, I am an avid Phillies fan. I have lived with this team through their wonderful stretch in the late 2000s to their terrible stretch that I expect for the next couple years. But I do think that things are on the upswing. I don't know it's going to represent itself this year with wins, but I do think that this is an organization that has transformed itself, and it really needed to happen. We let ourselves get too old too fast. So without further ado, let's get into kind of where we stack up now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the future because they are my Phillies after all. So leading off, we're going to have Odubel Herrera playing either left or center field. This is a guy who I take personal pride in because last year as a Rule 5 pick, I watched him play in spring training 3 days in a row, and I said, this guy's going to be your starting center fielder. He's just a hitter. He is not a good leadoff hitter because he does swing at everything. He has that very much that island mentality. The running joke Pedro Guerrero used to say is you don't get off the island walking, you get off the island swinging. Well, boy, he lives up to that. He swings at everything, but he makes good contact. He sprays the ball all over the place. He can probably play in a bunch of different positions. Center field he had never played center field before. He turned into an above-average center fielder last year. Really impressed with his game. Hit 297. I see him being a 290 hitter with a little more pop than he showed last year, probably at 12 home run range. He's going to steal you 15 to 18 bases, play a good center field. I think he is a future piece. I think his future looks bright. Batting second is Cesar Hernandez. I don't necessarily have the same opinion of him. I think he is your definition of bench player, at best utility player. But for this team, because they're just kind of waiting for some young guys to come up, I think he's your starter. 270, 15 steals, not a lot of pop, not a lot of on-base help. I'm not a huge fan of Cesar Hernandez. I think long-term, Odubel Herrera may wind up being your second baseman because we have a lot of young guns in the outfield that will be coming up, and we don't have a whole lot of middle infield help. Batting third, the closest thing we have to the franchise, and that's Maikel Franco. Last year, they kind of screwed him and kept him down a little or too long because they wanted to stop the clock on his arbitration, but he is the real deal. Big guy, no foot speed at all, but boy, he has very, very soft hands playing third base. He has a quick bat, and he's one of those guys that when he hits, it sounds differently coming off the bat from a guy like him. So Franco's going to be good to 25 to 35 home runs moving forward. Hopefully he keeps that average in that 275 range. He's your middle of the lineup bat, hopefully for the next 7 years to come. Same can't be said of Ryan Howard, and Ryan Howard is a guy who is such a mixed bag, and I actually feel bad for the guy. People don't remember Ryan Howard in his prime had maybe the best 5-year stretch in the history of Philadelphia baseball, and that includes Mike Schmidt, who is the greatest player in the history of Philadelphia baseball. He averaged 45 home runs and 140 RBIs for a 5-year stretch, including hitting almost 60 and carrying us on his back one September. So the guy gets a bum rap now, and he is not the same player that he was. He's had a ton of injuries, the worst being that bad Achilles. I'm a guy who has ruptured both of his Achilles in the course of his life, and I can tell you, especially a guy his size, trying to get those legs back up to speed, you just don't have your base underneath you. So he's just not the same player. I still think he can hit for power. I still think he can hit righties, as long as he never, ever has to face a left-handed pitcher. What they should do is platoon him and Darren Ruff, which I think is what we may do this year. But this is his last year. It's unfortunate that people look at him now as what he is now versus what he was, because you'd like to see him get more respect than he does. At this point, honestly, it'd be better if he just moved on and we wait 5 years and we retire his number and put him on the Wall of Fame, because he deserves the credit, but it's not going to happen while he's playing. Batting fifth, everyone seems to think this Aaron Altier is going to be your starting outfielder. I don't see it. I don't know what everybody sees in this guy. I know he's got power. He hits for a lot of extra base hits. Again, I just don't see it. I guess for the short term he starts. We have some guys in the minors coming up that are going to help us. Peter Borges will play left field or center field because they signed him because he's a superior defensive player. He has tools, but it's going to be tough to get him a full-time at-bats because I don't think they're going to pull Odubel Herrera out of the lineup. I also don't think Borges is a long-term replacement. I think he's more short-term help. Maybe he's trying to get himself a little more money or get traded at the trade deadline to a team that needs a kind of a veteran bat. Batting seventh is Freddie Galvis. He's a guy I'll give credit to because I never thought he was going to hit 250, let alone 265 as he did last year. I thought he was a 220 hitter. He impressed me last year. He's always been a very good fielder. He did make some careless errors last year, but you never have to worry about him in the field. He has great hands. He can do pretty much anything defensively. Played second after having never played there before, was excellent. I think he's a stopgap as well. He might have a future as a second baseman, but our stud prospect, which I'll talk about in a minute, is coming up very shortly from the shortstop position. Freddie Galvis is not going to hold him up much longer. Batting eighth, you probably have a combination of Cameron Rupp and Carlos Ruiz. I love Chooch. Chooch is another guy who is one of the last two members of that 2008 championship team. He was great for us. He carried that pitching staff. You ask Roy Halladay, who his favorite catcher of all time is, it's Carlos Ruiz. That said, he just can't hit anymore. He can't play 100 games. The legs aren't with him, and you wouldn't want to play him 100 games anyway because the batting average doesn't carry it. So Rupp will get some time. He's a big old country boy. He's got some power. He's also a decent catcher. Both stopgaps because we also have some minor league prospects coming up. So let's talk a little bit about the minors before we get into the rotation. Long term, I see we have Andrew Knapp, who's going to start this year at Reading. He had 355 in 40 games there last year and 325 in single A. I think he's your long-term catcher because I think he has more defensive ability than Jorge Alfaro. Jorge Alfaro, I think, is going to be a hitter, though, in the major leagues. He was one of Texas's number one prospects a couple years ago. I think they move him to first base. Second base, there is no reasonable alternative. That's why I do think you see like a Cesar Hernandez or you see an Odubel Herrera move in because we have some outfield prospects to play second base. Shortstop, J.P. Crawford, on every top 10 prospect list in the world. Kid can do it all. For 2 years in a row in the minor leagues, as a 19 and 20-year-old kid, he had more walks than strikeouts. That's unheard of. He's going to develop 15 homer power, especially in Philadelphia. He's going to steal 30 bases. Defensively, he can do it all. He's going to be special. You guys can write that down now. Third base is locked up with Franco. Left field, long term, I see Cornelius Randolph being our left fielder, but that's a couple years away. So until then, I think you may have Altier play out there next to Odubel Herrera in center unless he moves to second. And Nick Williams is going to play either right field or he's going to play center field, and we're going to move Herrera. Nick Williams came over in the Cole Hamels trade and just lit it up. Put himself back on track as a top prospect, hitting in that 310 plus range, hit about 15 home runs in half a year, really played well, plays a good defensive center field. I'm going to be excited to go to Reading and to Lehigh Valley, which are both near my house, to see these guys as they come up this year. So the future is very bright for our lineup. Let's move on to the rotation. It's going to be young. It's going to have some challenges. You're going to get to see a lot of the young pitchers. Aaron Nola is our de facto number one. I'm not sure he's a true number one, but I'll tell you, he was a good player, came up with a lot of hype last year, and lived up to it, pitched pretty well. I think long-term he's a real solid number two. This year we have Jeremy Hellickson as our number two. He's an innings eater. I think he's going to have some trade deadline value. I think he can pitch. He does give up the home run. He's a little susceptible to the long ball. Not great in Philadelphia, but I think he's got some talent. They brought Charlie Morton in to be a starter as well. Not a huge Charlie Morton fan. I think he's just your middle-of-the-road innings eater. Same can be said of Brett Oberhauser. He will start for us. He's out of options, and we don't have a ton to keep in front of him. But I think those guys are just keeping seats warm. Jared Eichhoff last year came up and pitched absolutely fantastic. Has to be in the rotation at this point. Wasn't expected to be one of the centerpieces of that trade, but he turned out to be. So we're going to bring him up. We have guys like Alec Asher and Jake Thompson in the minor leagues. These were two key components of the Cole Hamels trade. They haven't made it up yet. I think very short term they will. I think, again, the future is bright there. In a couple years, when the rest of our team is rounded into form, we probably do have to buy a true number one. And once we do that, it moves everybody into position in the rotation where they should be. Nola as your number two, Eichhoff as your number three. And this team can really contend. I'm wearing red-colored glasses. I understand that, but I do think it's possible. In the bullpen, yikes. The Phillies bullpen. Bullpens in general are pretty volatile. This year, the Phillies has the potential to be awful to average. I'm hoping for average. They have a guy like a David Hernandez or Edward Mujica is going to be your closer. neither of which inspired me to want to go out and buy my championship tickets. But, hopefully somebody steps up. You get a guy from the minors like a Jimmy Cordero who steps up and winds up being a closer long term. We traded away Giles, which everybody was angry about trading Ken Giles, but he got us a huge package, and a closer on a bad team is pretty much useless. So there was no reason to keep him. So I'm okay with the move. So long term, I do see this as a winning team, but in a couple of years, this year is going to be tough. But I'll tell you, I picked them higher than the experts. I'll say they win 70 games this year because God help me, I can't stand another 64 win season. I do think they're a little better than the Braves, so thank God for the Braves. Will keep us out of last place. But that's your Phillies forecast. If anybody from the Philadelphia area wants to hear more or has questions about some of these prospects, I'm always happy to talk Phillies baseball. With that, I'm your host, the G-Man, and I am out.